Okay, you know the drill. Every time you go to the doctor, you hear it. A number over another number. That's your blood pressure. We all know it's a vital sign, but let's be honest, it's one we often just nod along to without really getting it. So what do those numbers actually mean? Well, today we're going to break it all down. So your doctor says, looks good, you're 12 over 8. And you think, great. I think? Is that good? Is it bad? What is that even measuring? In this explainer, we're going to get to the bottom of exactly what's happening inside your body that produces those two little but super important numbers. So here's our game plan. We're going to tackle that 12 over 8 mystery head on. To do that, we'll look at the heart and just how powerful it is, and then the amazing role our arteries play. After that, we'll get into how we measure that force, what the numbers really mean, and finally, why your blood pressure is anything but a static number. All right, so first things first, where does this pressure even come from? Well, to get the numbers, we have to start at the source of the force, your heart. Think of it as this incredible engine right at the center of your circulatory system, and it's driving everything. So at its most basic level, what is blood pressure? It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's the physical force of your blood pushing out against the walls of your arteries as it circulates. It's kind of like the air pressure inside a tire. It creates just the right amount of tension to keep the whole system working smoothly. Your heart is just this relentless, incredibly powerful pump. I mean, even when you're just sitting there totally relaxed, it's contracting somewhere between 50 and 80 times every single minute. And each one of those beats is part of what we call the cardiac cycle, this perfect, constant rhythm of contraction and relaxation. And that cardiac cycle, it really breaks down into two main phases. First, you've got systole. That's the big squeeze, right? The heart contracts, pumps blood out, and that creates the moment of maximum pressure in your arteries. And right after that, you have diastole. That's when the heart relaxes and refills with blood, and the pressure drops to its minimum point. So it's systole, diastole. Squeeze, relax. Maximum pressure, minimum pressure. But here's the thing. The heart is really only half the story. The pressure it's creating has to be managed by a super important partner, your arteries. And they aren't just sitting there. They're performing this dynamic, elegant role that you can really think of as a dance. It's really easy to picture our arteries as just these simple, stiff pipes, but that couldn't be further from the truth. They're living, muscular tissues, and their walls are incredibly elastic. And that elasticity, it is the absolute key to everything. It lets them act like shock absorbers, protecting all your delicate organs like your brain and your kidneys from the full force of the heart's powerful surges. And this is where that partnership, that dance, becomes so clear. During systole, when the heart pumps out blood, the arteries actually expand to absorb that pressure surge. Then, during diastole, when the heart is resting, those elastic artery walls contract, pushing the blood along. It's this brilliant design that turns the heart's kind of jerky start-stop pumping into a smooth, continuous flow of blood to your entire body. Okay, so we've got this powerful force from the heart and this elegant dance from the arteries. But how in the world do we measure all that from the outside? Well, the technology behind it actually has a pretty fascinating history. I mean, the very first measurements back in 1828 were, well, pretty invasive. They used a mercury tube stuck directly into an artery. Yikes. The real game changer came in 1896 with the invention of that inflatable cuff we all know and love. And of course, today we have automated devices everywhere that have made checking our blood pressure a super simple, everyday thing. So let's quickly walk through the classic, old-school way of doing it. First, a cuff is wrapped around your arm and pumped up, which completely stops the blood flow for a second. Then, as the cuff is slowly deflated, a doctor listens with a stethoscope. That very first thump they hear, that's the sound of blood starting to push through again, and bam, that gives us our systolic pressure, the top number. They keep listening as the pressure falls, and the exact moment that thumping sound disappears completely, that's the diastolic pressure, our bottom number. Okay, and with that, we have all the pieces of the puzzle. We get the pump, we get the arteries, and we get how it's measured. So it is finally time to decode what 12 over 8 is all about. So when your doctor says 12/8, they're really just using common shorthand. What they mean is 12 centimeters of mercury. But the official scientific unit is actually millimeters of mercury. So to get that number, we basically just add a zero. 12/8 is the exact same thing as 120 over 80 mmHg. Simple as that. So what's considered high? Well, for a very long time, the general rule of thumb for high blood pressure or hypertension has been any consistent reading that's at or above 140 over 90.
But, and this is really important to know, these definitions are always evolving. For example, some really influential American guidelines from 2017 actually lowered the bar. They now classify hypertension as any consistent reading that's above 130 over 80. And this really just reflects a growing understanding of the long-term risks of even just moderately high pressure.
And that actually brings us to our final and really crucial point. The number you get from that single reading at the doctor's office, it's not a fixed number. In fact, your blood pressure is constantly changing all day, every day. I mean, just think about your day. When you're exercising, your pressure goes up to get more blood to your muscles. Totally normal. If you get stressed out or anxious, it can spike temporarily. And then, when you're resting or sleeping, it naturally goes down. This up and down fluctuation is completely normal and expected. A perfect example of this is something called the white coat effect. You've probably heard of it. For a lot of people, just the stress of being in a doctor's office is enough to make their blood pressure go up. So a reading might look high at the clinic, but be totally normal when they're relaxed at home. So how can you get the most accurate reading possible? Well, a few simple things can make a huge difference. Try to rest for 5 or 10 minutes beforehand. Sit quietly in a chair with your arms supported at about the level of your heart. And make sure the cuff is the right size. One that's too small can actually give you a falsely high reading. It's also a great idea to check both arms at first and then use the higher number as your personal baseline going forward. So in the end, that simple phrase, 12 over 8, is so much more than just two numbers on a chart. It's a snapshot. It's one single moment in time, capturing that powerful, nonstop dance between your heart's mighty contraction and your artery's graceful, elastic response. And that leads to a really fascinating final thought. We're seeing all this new tech emerge that might measure blood pressure from a smartphone camera, or maybe even sensors built into your home. So what happens if tracking this vital sign becomes as easy and effortless as just checking the time on your watch? Imagine a future where we have a continuous, real-time picture of our blood pressure. How could that change everything we know about managing our health?